Julian Cross wasn't just any music producer in Miami. He was the name behind a dozen Billboard hits, collaborating with artists like K-Flo and Selena Reyes. Tall, charismatic, and always dressed to impress, Julian was the kind of man you noticed when he walked into a room. Raised in Tampa Bay, Julian learned piano from his church choir and was producing beats by the time he was 17. He moved to Miami in 2010, and within a few years, he was throwing parties in waterfront mansions and scouting talent at every underground club. But behind the charm and success was a man who had secrets he'd never share, until someone tried to expose them. Cassandra Lane was Julian's first wife, a rising jazz singer with a hauntingly beautiful voice. They met at a music showcase in 2012. Cassandra was different, smart, grounded, a voice that could melt any heart. To their friends, they were a power couple. But behind the scenes, things weren't so glamorous. Cassandra hated the party lifestyle, the women, and especially the rumors about Julian's infidelity. By 2015, the marriage was showing cracks, and then she disappeared. It was a quiet Thursday when Cassandra failed to show up for her recording session. Her car was found parked outside her apartment. Phone dead, wallet inside, no sign of forced entry. Julian told police she had been stressed and mentioned going on a solo retreat to clear her mind. But Cassandra's sister, Lisa, wasn't buying it. She said Cassandra had recently discovered something about Julian's finances, and she had been scared. The police launched an investigation, but with no body and no crime scene, the case went cold. The police launched an investigation, but with no body and no crime scene, the case went cold. Months turned into years. The tabloids had moved on, and so had Julian. In public, he acted like a grieving widower. In private, he was throwing bigger parties than ever. He signed a new artist named Saria Vega, a sultry R&B singer who many claimed looked eerily like Cassandra. Meanwhile, Lisa continued her own investigation, tracking down Cassandra's old friends, phone records, and even hiring a private detective. But the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. Marisol Rivera was no stranger to power, charm, or ambition. She'd spent a decade navigating high-profile circles, from modeling in Madrid to managing corporate partnerships in South Florida. When she met Julian Cross at a gala benefiting Latin youth music programs in early 2018, she saw him as a brilliant and misunderstood artist, still mourning the mysterious loss of his first wife. At first, their romance was electric. Julian treated her like royalty, lavishing her with attention, exclusive gifts, and promises of building an empire together. But over time, beneath the glamour and red carpets, Marisol noticed something chilling. Julian never talked about Cassandra, except in vague, rehearsed lines. He called her unstable, private, and troubled. But when Marisol pressed for details, dates, last conversations, even how she went missing, Julian always redirected. That alone wouldn't have been cause for alarm. But strange things began piling up. One afternoon, Marisol found an old photo tucked behind a drawer in Julian's studio, Cassandra, smiling in front of a piano. She hadn't even known there were still photos of Cassandra in the house. Julian had told her he'd removed everything out of respect for his grief. Then came the email. A week later, while accessing a shared drive for a studio shoot, Marisol accidentally opened a folder marked Archived Contracts. Inside were NDAs from years ago, signed by women who had worked with Julian, and one signed by Cassandra Lane, dated just weeks before her disappearance. The language in the document was intense. Phrases like confidentiality in perpetuity and knowledge of undisclosed business matters stood out like flashing red lights. What had Cassandra known? Marisol confronted Julian with the photo and the document. He laughed it off, called it old business drama. But Marisol knew something wasn't right. She had always trusted her instincts, and they were screaming now. Her unease turned to suspicion after speaking casually with one of Julian's longtime housekeepers, who let something slip. Senora Cassandra, she was always afraid of this house after dark. From that point forward, Marisol was no longer just Julian's wife. She was a woman on a quiet mission. She started keeping a journal of her own. Every inconsistency, every unusual call Julian made. She even went back and rewatched old interviews Julian had done after Cassandra's disappearance, noticing how he never looked directly at the camera when asked about her. Their first year was picture perfect. Red carpet appearances, magazine spreads, and music video cameos. Julian was basking in the glow of his second marriage, and Marisol was being praised as his muse. But privately, Marisol was finding inconsistencies. Julian's stories about Cassandra didn't match up. He said she had mental health issues. But old friends described her as calm and focused. Marisol started asking questions, and someone didn't like that. One night, Marisol confronted Julian after finding a stash of old letters in his studio, letters from Cassandra. The tone of the letters was desperate. Cassandra wrote of fear, manipulation, and being watched. Julian brushed it off as old drama, but Marisol wasn't convinced. She began contacting Cassandra's sister, Lisa, behind Julian's back. That was the beginning of the end. Lisa was shocked when Marisol contacted her. She had nearly given up hope of finding out what happened to Cassandra. Marisol came prepared, with emails, photos of Julian's studio, and even a voice memo she secretly recorded during an argument with him. In the recording, Julian mentioned that some things are better left buried, and it sent chills down Lisa's spine. The two women agreed to dig deeper together. They reviewed Cassandra's final days, retraced her steps, and discovered a journal she kept, hidden in an old storage unit. The journal hinted at threats, blackmail, and even mentioned a safe folder she had kept on a USB drive. Marisol found the USB in a small ceramic vase in Julian's home office, exactly where Cassandra's journal described. It contained dozens of documents, bank transfers, NDAs, and what appeared to be private communications between Julian and a known Miami fixer. Among the files was a video, grainy security footage showing Cassandra arguing with a man outside a beachside motel. The man resembled Julian. Marisol and Lisa took the drive to a former detective Lisa knew from her investigation days. He confirmed that the footage was never part of the police report. Someone had paid to have it buried. Julian began to notice changes in Marisol's behavior. She was distant, often sneaking out, and avoiding intimate conversations. One night, he followed her and saw her meet with Lisa and the retired detective in a coffee shop. That same night, Marisol returned home to find her computer wiped and the USB missing. Julian acted surprised, concerned, even, but Marisol knew it was him. What she didn't know was that Julian had already placed a tracker on her car and was monitoring her every move. On April 22, Marisol made a panicked call to Lisa. She said Julian confronted her and threatened to end this like the last time. The call was cut short, and Lisa tried calling back, no answer. She contacted the police immediately, but without concrete proof of danger, they couldn't act fast enough. By morning, Marisol's car was found abandoned on a coastal highway, keys still in the ignition. Her body was discovered in a drainage canal 2 days later. The cause of death: blunt force trauma and drowning. News of Marisol's death spread like wildfire. The media couldn't get enough of the tragic parallels between Cassandra and Marisol. Julian gave a tearful statement at a press conference, claiming Marisol had been depressed and impulsive. But Lisa wasn't having it. She went to the media with everything: emails, the journal, the video stills. A new investigation was launched, and for the first time, Julian found himself under the spotlight, not as a grieving husband, but as a suspect. And this time, the city wasn't so quick to look away. If you're gripped by this powerful story, take a moment to support our channel. Like this video, share it with others, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life crime stories told like never before. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. As the new investigation reopened Cassandra Lane's cold case, a new witness came forward. Eduardo Eddie Morales, a former sound engineer who worked with Julian in 2015. Eddie claimed that one night, he overheard a heated conversation between Julian and Cassandra about money laundering. He said Julian was panicking about feds sniffing around, and warned Cassandra to keep her mouth shut or else. At the time, Eddie didn't think much of it. He thought it was just a lover's quarrel. But when he saw the news about Marisol, he knew he had to speak. His sworn statement added fuel to the fire, and detectives now suspected Julian's involvement in not one, but 2 suspicious deaths. Julian's legal team and publicists sprang into overdrive. They painted him as a grieving, misunderstood artist. hounded by the media and manipulated by bitter in-laws. Exclusive interviews were aired, celebrities defended him, fans rallied with #Justice for Julian trending on social media. But behind the cameras, Julian was growing increasingly paranoid. Surveillance cameras around his mansion were upgraded, staff were let go, and he refused to leave the house without security. His confidence was unraveling, and people close to him were starting to notice. The forensic team made a breakthrough when they re-examined evidence from Cassandra's case. Traces of her blood were found inside the trunk of Julian's old BMW, which had been auctioned years earlier. The car had since changed owners 3 times, but the bloodstains, small and smeared, were consistent with a blunt head injury. Meanwhile, Marisol's autopsy revealed ligature marks on her wrists and evidence of a struggle, contradicting Julian's earlier statement. This new wave of forensic evidence cracked the case wide open. A major turning point came from someone who had worked silently in the shadows: Julian's longtime housekeeper, Ana Delgado. Ana had been with Julian since his early days in Miami and had seen both Cassandra and Marisol come and go. She told detectives that one night in 2015, Julian came home alone, bloody and trembling. He told her Cassandra had gone too far, and it was over now. Ana had kept quiet all these years out of fear, but Marisol's death broke her silence. Her testimony gave prosecutors the timeline and motive they needed to build a formal case. On the morning of August 4, the Miami-Dade Police Department issued an arrest warrant for Julian Cross. Helicopters hovered above his mansion as he was taken into custody in front of national news cameras. Julian appeared calm, too calm, as he was escorted away in handcuffs. His fans were divided. Some claimed it was set up. Others felt vindicated, finally seeing justice inch forward. For Lisa Lane, it was the beginning of the end of a nightmare, a moment she'd waited nearly a decade to see. Julian Cross's trial became the most publicized courtroom drama Miami had seen in years. Crowds gathered daily outside the courthouse, hoping for a glimpse of the man who had once lit up red carpets, and was now shackled in a jumpsuit. The prosecution came in strong, outlining a disturbing pattern of manipulation, control, and violence. They presented Cassandra's journal entries, Marisol's voice memo, and Ana Delgado's chilling testimony. Julian pleaded not guilty to both murders, but his stoic demeanor began to crack as old demons returned to haunt him. Digging into Julian's finances revealed a motive more sinister than anyone expected. Prosecutors uncovered offshore accounts, shell companies, and ties to organized crime figures in Colombia and Miami. Cassandra had found out Julian was laundering money through record deals. Marisol found out he had killed to cover it up. In both cases, the women were silenced after confronting him. The evidence now painted Julian not just as a jealous husband, but as a cold-blooded operator willing to kill to protect his empire. During the trial, investigators unveiled something the media latched onto immediately: the Red Room. This secret studio in Julian's Biscayne estate was heavily soundproofed and accessible only through a biometric lock. Inside were remnants of a struggle: a broken necklace that matched one Cassandra wore, and bloodstains hidden beneath a replaced floor tile. Photos of the room stunned the jury and the world. The prosecution called it Julian's personal graveyard for secrets. Lisa Lane testified on the 12th day of the trial. Her voice trembled at first, but her words were razor-sharp. She detailed Cassandra's fear in the months before her disappearance, the sleepless nights, and the coded messages hidden in their texts. She spoke of her heartbreak over Marisol's death, a woman she had only known for a year but had grown to trust and love. Lisa reminded the jury, and viewers watching from around the world, that this wasn't just about fame or fortune. It was about 2 women who died because they dared to uncover the truth. Julian's defense team launched an aggressive counterattack. They painted Cassandra as mentally unstable, citing her journal as evidence of delusion and paranoia. They claimed Marisol was a social climber who faked evidence and had a secret affair with the detective investigating Julian. They even suggested Lisa had planted evidence in Julian's home, hoping for a big settlement or media deal. But the jury wasn't buying it, and the public had already made up their minds. After 6 weeks of testimony, 42 witnesses, and nearly 300 exhibits of evidence, the courtroom fell silent as the jury left to deliberate. Outside, news vans camped out, live streams surged, and hashtags like #JulianVerdict dominated social media. Legal analysts speculated it could take days, even weeks, for a decision, given the complexity of the case. But the jury returned in just 11 hours, a sign that the evidence may have been more damning than even the public realized. Tension blanketed the courtroom as everyone waited for the foreperson to speak. On a rainy Miami afternoon, the verdict was delivered. Guilty of first-degree murder, not once, but twice. Julian Cross showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, his eyes fixed forward, jaw clenched, lips pursed. Lisa Lane wept in the front row, clutching a locket that once belonged to Cassandra. Julian's attorney immediately filed an appeal, but the judge made it clear, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted with reactions. For some, it was justice. For others, the fall of a legend. In the days following the verdict, the music industry reeled. Artists Julian had once mentored began distancing themselves. Record labels issued statements condemning his actions and pulled albums associated with his production. A documentary deal based on Lisa Lane's investigation was announced, and Marisol's family filed a civil suit against Julian's estate. Ana Delgado entered witness protection, citing ongoing threats from Julian's former associates. The mansion where so many secrets had been buried, seized and scheduled for demolition. In a powerful joint memorial, Marisol and Cassandra were honored in a candlelight ceremony by the water. Artists performed songs written by both women, and Lisa gave a speech that left the crowd in tears. She said, "They weren't just victims. They were voices. They were warnings. And now, they're legends." Plans were announced to create a nonprofit foundation in their names to support women escaping abusive relationships. In the end, their lives, and their deaths, sparked a movement greater than the man who tried to silence them. Julian Cross was transferred to a maximum security prison in northern Florida. There, the once famed producer became inmate number 997,014. No red carpets, no interviews, no spotlight. Fellow inmates reportedly viewed him with contempt, calling him the music killer. He refused therapy, denied interviews, and spent most of his time in solitary confinement. Some say he still hums unfinished songs in his cell, haunted by ghosts only he can hear. Lisa Lane could have walked away after the verdict, but instead, she leaned in. She became an advocate for women's safety in the entertainment industry, speaking on national panels and college campuses. Her nonprofit, Cassandra and Marisol Voices, launched with the mission to provide legal aid and counseling to women at risk. Lisa even wrote a book titled Buried Beats: The True Story Behind the Julian Cross Murders, which hit bestseller lists within weeks. Through tragedy, she had become the face of resilience and a voice for the voiceless. The Julian Cross case triggered shockwaves throughout the music industry. Multiple producers and executives were investigated for similar abuse, silencing, and misconduct cases. Artists began speaking out about toxic environments and manipulative power dynamics behind the scenes. Labels instituted new safety protocols, mental health resources, and even created hotlines for whistleblowers. While the scars of what Julian did remained, real change, had begun to take root. Their stories, once buried by fame, manipulation, and silence, now live on in justice, in law, and in every voice that refuses to be silenced. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about murder. It was about truth, courage, and the cost of uncovering secrets some would kill to protect. If this story moved you, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the headlines. Share this video to raise awareness about how often the voices of women are silenced, and how important it is to never stop asking questions. Got theories or thoughts on this case? Drop them in the comments below. We read every one. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and stay Lou.